Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for another episode of Ask the Chief on Santa Monica's City TV. This is your chance to ask Santa Monica Police Chief Jacqueline Seabrooks your questions, and there is a lot going on in the city that we need to cover. So, Chief, welcome back to Studio 16.
Well, thank you for having me. It's wonderful to be here again.
Do you enjoy taking these questions from the viewers and from the citizens?
Of course I do. You know that.
It's a lot of fun, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It's always wonderful to create that opportunity for dialogue.
Right, and a lot of people who see you out in the community, they don't feel comfortable maybe approaching, and this is a great forum for them to get their questions asked.
Absolutely.
Okay, and a quick note to our viewers, by the way, if you're watching at home, we are live, so we're going to take your questions from callers live on the air. We'll put up a phone number here in just a minute, and we also have questions that we have received by email and social media, so we'll be adding those in as well. Chief, our first topic, and one that I know is very important to you, is community policing. Why is it important for the community and the police to sort of form a partnership and work together?
Well, public safety, community safety is a shared responsibility. Certainly we have the formal authority for that obligation, but I always say there is nothing more important than working with our community on the priorities for safety and the priorities that they feel are important for community safety. Because as Sir Robert Peel said many years ago, the police are the community and the community are the police. And that statement in and of itself speaks directly to the importance of working consistently with the community. And quite frankly, we've seen what's happened in other places across the country when there's been that breakdown.
So when the community and the police do work together, what does that sort of look like? And can you give us an example? Well,
I can give you more examples than we have time for. But what we'll start with is, well, there's the circumstances under which we have a good time. We have community or the National Night Out, which occurs in August, and what that is an opportunity for the police department in various venues throughout the city to get together with members of the community and introduce them to the various services that we offer, get to know the area police officers, get to know their neighbors, and it's a great exchange and it's a lot of fun that the police officers get to have with three-legged sack races, all kinds of things that show us in a different light, that show us in that more compassionate light, in that more friendly light. Because quite frankly, everyone knows that when we're about business, that it's about business. And then by the same token, it's also important because what it does is it encourages folks to get involved, if they see something, to say something, and to understand all of the dynamics that are associated with keeping a community safe.
The Santa Monica PD has begun a series of community dialogues. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yes. Back in the latter part of 2015, a presidential report was produced entitled 21st Century Policing. And in that report were a number of pillars and a number of recommendations for the astute police organization to follow in terms of just ensuring that it is meeting the obligations and the expectations of a variety of communities. We saw time and time again some very tragic things happening across the state and across the country, and I thought it was important for us to speak to our community, the community of Santa Monica, about the issues of race, about the issues of equity, about the issues surrounding procedural justice, and to give people a much clearer view about what the Santa Monica Police Department is doing and how we feel about such things and our commitments to constitutional policing, to procedural justice, to equity, and to non-bias in policing.
So how could a community member or a citizen get involved in one of those conversations?
Well, we're doing it in a very structured approach. Our initial conversations involved invitations, but soon, in the near future, on a quarterly basis, we'll have these community conversations coming to a location near you. So they'll be at our city is divided into 4 beats, and so each of the beats will have an opportunity to host one of the community conversations, and they'll be open to the public.
This is fun. This is a slightly different thing, if I'm not mistaken. SMPD is beginning a community challenge called Meet Your Neighbors.
Yes.
What is that exactly, and how does that work?
Now, that's a very different thing. That's another program that falls under the umbrella of community policing. We've noticed through a number of circumstances that happened in this past year that a lot of our residents don't know their neighbors. The community is changing. We have a lot of multifamily unit housing developments. We also have a turnover in the housing inventory. That means that new people are moving to the community, and they may not necessarily know who lives next door, who lives across the street. We're very busy people, and this is an opportunity for us to get the neighbors out, meeting each other, talking over coffee, and then getting involved in a way that promotes inter-neighborhood competition in a very positive way. And so at the end of that, and that'll be in the early spring, and the program just gets started this latter part of January, in the spring what will happen is the winner who gets to the most neighbors to meet, that neighborhood will have an opportunity to have a police department sponsored block party. And so we're trying to get people engaged. We're trying to make it fun and exciting, but at the same time competitive, because the underlying message of getting to know who your neighbor is harkens back to a different time, and it's very important that you know who lives next door.
And let's talk about that time. Like we were talking about this a little off camera. When we were growing up, it was like your next door neighbor was your babysitter. They were like, what was it like for you?
Oh, very similar. I mean, I was laughing as I thought about it that, you know, you could do something as a kid, and if the neighbor caught you, it would be, Jacqueline, Seabrooks, what are you doing? And I knew, you know, Mrs. Johnson was going to say something, and she was going to do something. And then I also knew that as soon as my mom got home from work and Mrs. Johnson talked to her, oh my goodness. Now, I'm not suggesting that, but that camaraderie, that understanding, that knowledge and trust is slowly being eroded, and in some neighborhoods is non-existent. And we want to do all we can to bring that back, because again, it's a shared responsibility, and when you know who your neighbor is, you're more likely to talk to them, you're more likely to let them know when you're going out of town, and all of those things build a sense of community and helps to promote safety.
And I personally believe, I'm a big walker and biker, so pedestrian and bicycling. I've gotten to know so many of my neighbors through just walking around the neighborhood, bicycling around, which is great. So when does that program begin, Meet Your Neighbors?
It begins the latter part of January, and it extends through the early spring. For more specific information, you can always check with our Community Affairs office at the Police Department, or check us online because the information is there as well.
Okay, perfect. I do want to give a quick note to our viewers. If you are watching us at home, a reminder that the phone lines are open. If you have a question for the chief, please call us at 310-458-4950. She's making this sign with her fingers. All police and law enforcement topics are open for discussion, am I right?
For the most part,
For
yes.
the most part, sure. Anything from parking tickets to public safety, and of course the important things as well. We do want to hear from you. Chief, I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about some of the legislative updates, and that's a term for new laws that are taking effect January 1 or the beginning of this year. What are the ones that stick out in your mind?
Well, there's some that have to do with vehicle safety operations, certainly. There's some new laws that affect child safety seats and the direction that they need to be positioned in for quite a bit. You saw that the seats where the child faces forward. Now there's some new weight and age restrictions, and the seats must face the rear. So there's some areas there. We can certainly provide information on our website about what those new laws are. And then there's the big one, Proposition 64, which is the legalization of the recreational use of marijuana.
Let's get into that in just a second, but we do have our first live caller.
Oh my
ready?
Goodness. Yes.
Okay, Catherine, you are live on Ask the Chief. Go ahead with your question.
Yes, hi, good evening.
Hi, Catherine.
Hi, thank you for taking my call. My question is, I'm wondering if in the future or if there will be CCTV cameras down on the pier, as well as a beach patrol, such as they do for Malibu and City of Venice.
Okay, well that's a great question. Currently, we do have a public video system in the downtown. I don't like to speak specifically to how many cameras we're talking about or their exact placement, because I think it's important that people who aren't doing what they're supposed to do don't need to know what we're doing in terms of strategies to catch them doing those things. But we do have a public video CCTV system. Having said that, the beach patrols occur all year round, but they're much more pointed during our busiest time, which is the summertime during our hotter months. So we do patrol the beaches. Please don't get the impression that because you don't see us out there in the volume that you do on the ATVs, in the vehicles that traverse the beach, that we're not patrolling the beach.
Would you like to talk about the partnership with the Sheriff's Department for the pier concerts now, or should we come back to that?
Let's come back to that.
Okay, you got it. Thank you very much for your call, Catherine. I really appreciate it.
Indeed.
Getting back to what you talked about, big new law coming into effect this year, although I think it's really kicked in this year, is marijuana legalization.
Yes.
Talk to me a little bit about that and what your thoughts are.
Well, Proposition 64 actually passed this past November, and as you know, when propositions pass, they technically go and become the law of the land the next day. But because there's a lot to it, the typical way that it's approached is at the new year. Okay. So what's happening now, Prop 64 makes legal the recreational use of marijuana, subject still to some restrictions. It's not open season for young people under the age of 18 to smoke marijuana. It was illegal prior to the passage of the proposition, and even after the proposition it remains illegal. So if you're young, you can't smoke weed, I'm sorry, and you can't smoke it at school, for sure. And then it's separate than medicinal marijuana. Medicinal marijuana has its own set of rules and guidelines that go with it that come in the form of the requirement to have a card and a prescription and those kinds of things. In this case, though, the smoking of marijuana publicly is still precluded and against the law, so you can still receive a citation for that. But you can possess a certain amount legally. You can actually grow on private property a number of plants, no more than 6, and they have to be grown outside of the public view. So there's a number of things in that regard that make it acceptable. There are some other components such as dispensaries where people can get into the business of selling the variety of brands of medicinal marijuana. And to be sure that the police department staff is understanding how the nuances of this proposition, we'll be all attending a conference on February 14th to talk about, how does this affect our city, even as the city begins its plans to roll out its response over the course of the next few years.
What kind of challenges does that present for your officers who are going to have to learn this new law and I guess how to enforce it?
Well, I think it's not as complicated in some areas when it's just a conversation about straight possession. Okay, it's like having a pack of cigarettes. There's no problem with that. Mm-hmm. The challenge will be, getting people to understand the parameters for where they can smoke, where they can't. How does that interface with perhaps I'm smoking marijuana in my home, but I live in a building where I can't smoke cigarettes, and trying to navigate some of those refined nuances. And then equally, we have to recognize how driving under the influence of THC, how do we go about enforcing for that? Because driving impaired is really the issue. We say DUI, it's driving under the influence or driving while impaired. So we really have to be mindful of that, and our officers have to be trained on how to articulate the objective symptoms, i.e. the red watery eyes, the slurred speech, much as we would do if one were under the influence of alcohol. But we have to make sure that we follow through, because the testing processes that we ordinarily equate with driving under the influence of alcohol are substantially different when one is measuring THC, and some of that is still in its nascency in terms of development.
Do you think this will lead to marijuana dispensaries opening up on every other street corner in Santa Monica?
Absolutely not. Our city is far more sophisticated than to allow that. But I do believe that there will be dispensaries in town, both for the medicinal, which is already on the council's radar screen, and they've already decided several years ago to open 2. They were waiting for the outcome of Proposition 64, and then it will be a council decision as to how to best regulate the potential proliferation of recreational dispensaries, because they'll be treated very differently.
Great. I want to switch gears to crime now. How is the city doing overall with crime?
We're doing just fine. We're in the new year, and crime resets in the new year, so our numbers right now are, small numbers make for big percentage changes. So we're dealing with that. But the wonderful thing that I'm very pleased to talk about is that crime is still very low. This community is as safe as it's been since the 1950s. And despite the fact that we finished the year 2016 with a 6% increase over the crime figures for 2015, we're still talking about 4,500 crimes in 2016 versus 4,200 crimes in 2015. And those crimes where that increase has occurred has largely been in property crimes, not violent crimes. And that's an important distinction.
So the biggest area of concern would be what?
Thefts from automobiles,
Okay.
Burglaries from automobiles. The difference there being one is locked for the theft, it's unlocked for a theft, and it's locked for a burglary. Auto theft, plain and simple, you come out, your car is gone, and then retail theft. Those are the larger. That's the trifecta of what we deal with in terms of property crime. Not so much violent crime, thank goodness.
I live in downtown Santa Monica. I work in downtown Santa Monica. It's amazing to me the increase in activity in the downtown area and also the tourism, which is booming. Is the police department prepared to deal with that real growth in the downtown area?
Oh, absolutely. The police department, well, let me back up a bit. Santa Monica has been a destination location since its inception in the late 1800s. The police department came along around 123 years ago or so, and we've addressed this increasing volume. I was reading some materials the other day talking about the amount of tourism in the 40s and in the 50s and moving forward. So it's not new to us to address 9 million visitors per year and a 93,000 resident population. When I came here in the mid of 2012, we were at about 6.9 million visitors per year, and now we're at 9 million. It's a great destination location. We have a lot of fancy restaurants, and fancy, wrong word, fabulous is actually the key word. We have a lot of fabulous restaurants. There's a lot of fabulousness in this community, and people in other locations want to come here, whether it's international or whether it's more regional.
What can the community do to help address the burglaries, bike thefts, automobile thefts, things like that?
Well, I believe in if you see something strange, say something, call us. We want to know. And then, I want to be cautious because I don't ever want it to sound as though we're blaming victims for the thefts that they may be victimized by. But I think people should be a bit more attentive to what they leave out in the open inside their vehicle. We have a video series called Don't Be That Person. And we have a camera that goes by, and it's held by an officer, of course, and we document people leaving iPads and computers and purses and luggage on the front seat in, just inviting someone to steal it. And it's horrifying to think that other people are so thoughtless that they would steal property that doesn't belong to them, but that's why we're here. Just put a stop to that. But the reality is, with that many visitors and that high a volume of people coming to our community, there is bound to be always a level of criminality. We're here to stamp it out and hold the line against it, but we also encourage folks to do all that they can to insulate themselves from the likelihood of being a victim.
I want to move on to the Exposition Metro Light Rail line. The line coming into Santa Monica last May, has this had a noticeable effect on public safety in any way?
I won't say a noticeable impact in an adverse way. I mean, we've had 3 train collisions with vehicles. The vehicles were all at fault for turning across the train tracks. We had the unfortunate circumstance where a patron on the train pulled 2 knives on one of the sheriff's deputies patrolling the platform, and that person was shot. But in terms of measurable increases in crime, absolutely not. The fact that we've held the line at 6%, and the things that I said that we were plagued by, which were retail theft, theft from automobiles, the theft of automobiles, and the burglary from motor vehicles, none of that has anything to do with the train. So I think when something new comes into a community, sometimes there's this level of uncertainty that causes people a bit of fear, and that uncertainty, the new thing creates a magnet for that uncertainty. And so people are always uncertain about crime, and so here's this new thing coming into the community, all these different people coming into the community, and it's an easy jump. But our statistics and the truth and the facts and the safety of this community and how safe this community has been belies that.
We're going to talk a little bit more about safety in just a moment. Chief Seabrooks, we do need to take a quick break. And can you stick around for a few more?
I think I can do that.
Okay, awesome. All right, when we come back, we have some more important information regarding the Expo line, and also we have a special guest live in the studio. We will be right back with more Ask the Chief right after this.
Sometimes the simplest things in life are the most special.
I'll have mint chip and strawberry.
I can eat both of those.
With age-related macular degeneration, even a walk in the park is no walk in the park.
Here's a sign. Discovery Hill hosts more trees than any other area of the park.
Everyone over 50 is at risk.
Come to Grandpa, buddy. Great, that's it. Come on, let's go.
Early detection and treatment can mean the difference between vision and blindness. The Macular Degeneration Partnership has one focus: preserving your eyesight.
What a beautiful day.
All because of you.
Visit amd.org for more information, and please get tested.
I have invented an algorithm that will revolutionize data compression and storage.
Do you have a place to meet potential investors? Do you know how to build an app? Do you know the basics of fundraising? Or how to utilize social media? Do you even have a business plan?
Well, no.
Then why don't you just ask a librarian?
I can help with all that. Santa Monica Library, the perfect partner for your startup.
At the Boys and Girls Club of Santa Monica, we build long-lasting relationships with our kids.
Love. Friendships.
Support. Trust.
Learning.
I know, fun.
All that and a lot more.
We're not just a club. We're family.
Great futures start here.
Choose your ride.
Hey guys, I'm Lucas Giolito.
And I'm Tyler Heineman. While we both might play in different Major League organizations,
we grew up here in Santa Monica playing Little League together.
So on behalf of the city, the Santa Monica Police Department, and your loved ones,
we urge you to make that smart choice when you go out on the town with your friends.
Have a good time, but please don't drink and drive.
We want to make sure that you get home safe every time. Choose your ride.
Welcome back to this live edition of Ask the Chief, where Santa Monica Police Chief Jacqueline Seabrooks answers your questions. If you have a question for the Chief, please call the number on your screen, 310-458-4950. Chief, we've already covered a lot of great information. Can we keep going?
Absolutely.
Okay, I liked what you were saying before about, we were talking about public safety and the Expo line light rail. What would you say to people who worry or they're concerned that the train is bringing crime to Santa Monica? Is there any truth to that?
No, there's no truth to that.
Okay.
I would say, well, I don't want to just unequivocally dismiss their concerns, but I would say that the concerns need to be tempered by the facts. Certainly when you have the population growth that we have through visitorship, there is a potential for crimes of opportunity, whether that means that someone is engrossed in reading their iPad too close to the door on the train and someone, snatches it and runs out and runs down the street. Sure, those kinds of things do happen, but I can say this. There is no epidemic of crime happening as a result of the return of light rail after some 60 years of not having it. We've had some traffic collisions, as I mentioned earlier. There's crime of opportunity, but again, a lot of the crimes that drive our crime numbers, reported clearly, but are not the kinds of things that are impacted by the return of the train at all.
Okay. We have another live caller. You ready for a question from one of our viewers? Chris, you are on the air live with Chief Seabrooks. Go ahead and ask the chief.
Yeah. I would like your opinion on prison realignment and Proposition 47 and 57, which decriminalized a lot of theft and drug sentences. What effect do you think it's had in the city, and what's your opinion of it?
Well, hello, Chris. Thank you for calling, and that's an excellent question. Proposition 47 and Proposition 57 operate to realign the criminal justice system, and were efforts to better alleviate overcrowding in the prison system, quite frankly. But I think, unfortunately, there were some huge gaps in execution. So a number of crimes have been decriminalized as a result. This idea that non-violent offenders were the only individuals who'd be subject to release, that necessarily hasn't brought about a level of truth. One of my officers was assaulted by someone who, I believe, had it not been for one of these propositions, would still be in custody. And it's only because of good tactics that that officer wasn't more severely injured, or that the person who assaulted him, attacked him, quite frankly, wasn't killed himself. So, when we speak of these things, while it's important to, make adjustments in the criminal justice system, I don't argue that, and to ensure that sentencing is appropriate for the underlying offense committed, I do believe that we were not as thoughtful as the people of the state of California voting for these things as we should have been. Now, the other side of that is some of those propositions were couched in language that, unless you read the fine print, which people are sometimes want to do, these kinds of things get past us. And it is an unfortunate circumstance because we now have minimized some of the opportunity that we as law enforcement and the community needs to have in order to ensure that there's a level of ongoing safety. But that's something that, as time goes on, there have been some minor adjustments, and I'm hoping that as time goes on, there will continue to be adjustments in both the outcomes of Proposition 47 and 57.
Great question, Chris. Thank you very much for calling in, and thank you for asking that. I want to follow up something we alluded to earlier, the partnership with Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. Tell us about that for people who aren't familiar with it, and how's that coming along?
Okay, well, the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department has jurisdiction in unincorporated cities, and also they provide a level of assistance to us through a mutual aid agreement. They are one of several cities that we look to for emergent assistance for unplanned type of events. Well, last year, for the first time in our organization's history, we reached out to create a memorandum of agreement with the Sheriff's Department for some of our planned activities. And that was in direct response to the increasing popularity and the increasing draw the popularity of our Twilight concert series has brought forth. However, our relationship with the Sheriff's Department goes back many, many, many years. The courthouse is policed by the Sheriff's Department's personnel, so we clearly have a very clear relationship with them. We utilize the county facilities, the jail facilities that the Sheriff's Department is responsible for overseeing, so we have a close relationship in that regard. So it's not unusual for us to have reached out, certainly, knowing that light rail is policed currently by the Sheriff's Department, to make sure that we strengthen those bonds. So the bonds of our relationship in the courthouse, the bond of our relationship by virtue of the return of light rail and their primary jurisdiction for the platform and the train itself, and then equally our relationship with the Sheriff's Department by virtue of their operation of the county jail system. We have had a long-standing relationship with the Sheriff's Department, and I appreciate the leadership change with Sheriff McDonald and all that he's doing to bring a new sense of renewed professionalism to the Sheriff's Department.
So it's a great relationship,
Yes,
SMPD and the Sheriff's Department. You mentioned the peer concerts, and,
Yes.
and why is that? Why are they involved in the policing the peer concerts?
Well, The peer concert started some 30 years ago, and when it started, it was something that solely happened on the pier and was pre-social media, and was something that literally had a draw maximum of maybe 5,000 people at its prime. Well, time has evolved. Snapchat and other sponsors are sponsoring the event, and Snapchat as a social media entity certainly is utilizing that medium for announcing the concerts, bringing in the talent. And so there are times we have 40,000 people on the beach and an additional 10,000 people, well, I wouldn't say 10,000, I'll say 5,800 people on the pier, strictly there for the ambiance associated with the operation of the concerts. Well, we're a police department of 224 very able, very capable people, but when juxtaposed against a crowd of some 40,000, I would be remiss, my staff would be remiss if we didn't explore other alternatives for supplemental policing. So we did that, and we did that through the form of a memorandum of understanding or agreement with the Sheriff's Department that brings them in differently than if we're having an emergency, because this is a planned event and it happens on a routine schedule, hence the need for the agreement. And they have come in and they've been a strong partner in helping us to ensure that the concerts happen safely, in a way that everyone can agree is friendly, but by the same token, people know that we're there. And this last year, in 2016, because of the fire season, we didn't have access to the Sheriff's Department in the numbers that we would have liked. So we reached out to our partners in law enforcement in other jurisdictions, other cities. And for the first time, we had officers from Irwindale, as far away, and if you know where Irwindale is, it's pretty far away. On the eastern end of the county, Irwindale, on the northern end of the county, Glendale, very closely Downey. We had a number of agencies come and provide us with that kind of assistance. And it was great for them because they got to see what Santa Monica is all about and what we have to offer in a beach environment on beautiful Thursday evenings. And at the same time, we had the force multiplier of having a substantial number of officers so that folks who came to visit, whether they came to visit via the train, an automobile, a train, a bus, you name it, they had a great time at the concert venue, and then they went home. And they went home safely.
That's great. So just to follow up on that, so when a law enforcement jurisdiction other than Santa Monica PD is working the peer concerts, how do they make sure that they sort of enforce the laws uniformly like the SMPD officers do, who probably have been to dozens of peer concerts, whereas a sheriff's deputy might be his first time?
Absolutely. That's a wonderful question. What we do is we're very thoughtful about how we pair the officers up. So a sheriff's deputy, and it's not just two officers necessarily, it may be a small group of officers, say 4 to 6, something like that, and we pair them up so that the officers who are coming from a different jurisdiction, whether it's another municipality or it's the Sheriff's Department, they're paired with Santa Monica police officers. And we start the day with a briefing where we talk to our visiting law enforcement partners about the concert, about our policing philosophy, about our approaches to doing business, because that's really, really important for our people to know.
Is that a job that your officers apply for, or they want to work on the peer concerts, or is that considered a kind of a chore, like a tough job?
Well, we have tough jobs and then we have tough jobs.
Right.
This is one of those things where it's probably less considered a tough job, but because of the numbers of officers that we have to hire for those events, we do have to force hire. So it's not as though they have the full-on choice of participating, but our numbers in terms of the number of officers that we have to mandate that they work the concerts, that's actually small, all things being equal.
Okay. Question from Twitter, if you don't mind.
Not at all.
From Salons. We appreciate your question from Twitter. Why are officers not patrolling California Street, where many of the cars don't stop for pedestrians or stop signs and kind of roll right through?
That is a struggle that we have across the city. What's happened is a lot of the GPS-based applications that allow for travel in some of these other areas. You know, I don't know if I should say the names and give them a little bit of a shout out, but I'll be honest, Waze and Google and all these different ones.
Different maps.
These mapping applications come about and they move traffic into areas off the main thoroughfares and into the neighborhoods. And so the officers have to go into those neighborhoods. But we also have to be very mindful of, one, we have a limited number of officers who are on the motorcycles and, you know, in the traffic that we're in. Alternative transportation in an effort to catch a violator is almost essential these days. And then it also depends on what else is going on in the community. Our officers who are on patrol in the black and whites, they are subject to other radio calls. So they may not be there with the level of frequency over the duration of time that our caller or our tweeter, excuse me, might prefer. But let me say this, and let me say it unequivocally, we engage in traffic enforcement. We absolutely do. We are very, very aware that traffic is one of the major priorities and concerns of the members of our community. And if you don't believe me, just go out and see how crowded it is and how long it takes to move eastward from the downtown into other areas of the city, whether you're on the interstate or you're on some of the major thoroughfares. And I empathize with the residents in some of the on some of the non-thoroughfare, but they've become thoroughfares because of these mapping applications. I empathize with them because all of a sudden there's an increased volume on streets that previously hadn't seen that. And there's this sense that, you know, when the speed limit's 25, someone going 30, it really feels like they're going really fast. And so to the degree that we can, we emphasize traffic enforcement, utilizing our motorcycles and special details that we have for traffic, but we can't be everywhere all the time.
Right. And I'm glad you brought up traffic enforcement, because I always wonder about this. We are, as a society, so concentrated on our phones, and almost everything we do throughout the day we can do on our phone. Is that creating a problem with traffic? Are you seeing more accidents because people were on their phone, texting, tweeting, whatever they're doing?
Well, you know, no one ever admits that they were texting or tweeting. You can look right at them and they'll tell you now, because you asked me about a change that went into effect. Well, now, because we have to acknowledge that people do utilize their phones while they're driving, to look at the phone for directions, to swipe because maybe the screen goes dark and you swipe to get the screen back up so you can see where you're going. Well, most recently, the law changed to allow a degree of that. Now, that's very different than, you know, I'm talking on my phone without hands-free. That's very different than, you know, I'm watching a movie on my phone while I'm driving. It's very different than that. Right. So it just puts a different onus on the officer to be able to articulate what he or she is seeing as the person is engaged with their mobile device, and then how that is impacting the person's ability to have singular focus on the safe operation of the motor vehicle.
Switching gears to hiring. This SMPD is hiring, right?
We are hiring. We are hiring and hiring. This past year, we went through a significant number of retirements. One day in the latter part of December, I had 3 people retire on that day, all police officers, 1 sergeant, 2 police officers, and that represented 87, 88 years of professional experience walking out of the door. Well, we had some 25 people retire last year. So we are looking to fill vacancies and do so aggressively. And the opportunities to work in a wonderful organization for a wonderful boss.
Of course. A great boss.
A contemporary agency that is very focused on technology, very focused on the community policing experience, but at the same time is dedicated to training and all of those other things that I think everyone would agree makes for a solid police officer. We're looking for them. And if that happens to be you, you need to get in touch with us because as of, I believe it was January 7th, we were accepting applications until mid-February. And we go in cycles. We hire every quarter. So that means there's a written and a physical agility and a process that starts roughly every 3 months. The tragic part is for every 100 applicants we get, 1 or 2 make it all the way through the process for hiring.
So what weeds most people out? Or how do they get weeded out?
A little small thing called a background investigation, because people sometimes aren't thoughtful. While, you know, we do allow for certain no one is perfect, and I'm not looking for perfect people. I don't even know that that exists. So we understand that people bring, people may have experimented with marijuana. People may have poor credit. We look at the total person, and we're looking for people who bring a good thought process, a solid thought process to the table, who are looking for some challenging work that is selfless, and that ensures that the person understands the importance of community and policing in the same sentence.
Do you need a college degree?
No, you don't.
No, okay.
It's always preferred, and the vast majority of the officers that we have, from me on down, have at least one college degree. A number have two. I have people who have JDs, in fact, and up until recently I had someone who had a PhD. So, we very strongly encourage people to go back to school, because this is an evolving profession, and a profession implies that you have ongoing education in addition to the professional training that we will provide, but you don't have to have that coming in.
Do you encourage veterans to apply?
Absolutely. Now, there's no veterans preference credits given, but we absolutely encourage veterans to apply. Okay.
And any other, age restrictions, physical ability? Obviously, you have to be physically fit.
You have to be physically fit. And in terms of age, there is no upper age limit. Many years ago there was, but there isn't now. And I'm very happy to say that we hired a 52-year-old police officer the other day. He went to the police academy at age 50, joined our organization after working for another agency, and he's 52 years old, and he's out there on patrol, and from what I can tell, is enjoying the job. That's right.
All right, Chief, thank you so much. We're going to take another quick break, if you don't mind. I'd like to remind our viewers that the phone lines are open, and if you have a question for the Chief, please call 310-458-4950. All topics are welcome, from what kind of motorcycles does the SMPD use, to where do they keep the horses, and of course, serious questions about public safety. We would love to hear from you. All right, thank you so much. We'll be right back.
It's a wireless world out there, so be sure to stay connected with Santa Monica. Follow us on Twitter for the latest announcements. Receive instant updates on activities citywide. Like us on Facebook and join in on the conversation. Stay connected with your city. And don't miss a tweet.
Where is this guy? So thirsty.
I hear he travels from the north.
Look!
That one's really dry.
LA is in a drought, yet over half of our drinking water is being used for landscaping. But it doesn't have to be that way. Just 1 inch of rain can yield thousands of gallons of water for use in landscaping and saves drinking water for drinking. Rain barrels, cisterns, and curb cuts are just a few ways to save water and energy. For more, visit LADWP and the Bay Foundation online.
When you're finished with your food or beverage cartons, toss it in the recycling bin. Because every carton is recyclable and can be turned into useful paper products. Put your carton in the bin with your other recyclables and let them start a new life. When the contents are gone, let the carton live on. Recycle your cartons.
Jamie Lee Curtis here with a friendly reminder from the Santa Monica Police Department. Drinking alcohol and driving is illegal. So make good choices. Back of the squad car or back of the cab. Choose your ride.
Welcome back to Ask the Chief Live. We're in studio with Santa Monica Police Chief Jacqueline Seabrooks and a special guest, Dr. Phillip Kopp. And the topic is body-worn cameras. Thanks to both of you for being here. Dr. Kopp, your first time in Studio 16?
Yes, it is, Chris.
Okay, good. I want to introduce you for our viewers. You are an assistant professor of criminal justice at California State University, Fullerton, and you teach courses in policing, research methods, statistics, and crime control, right?
That's correct.
Am I the only one who thinks it's funny that your name is Dr. Kopp?
All of my students have that.
Is that right? Okay, good. We got a lot to cover on this. This is a very big topic. If you watch the news, body-worn cameras are very important right now. How far along are we, Chief, with the body-worn camera pilot program here in Santa Monica?
Well, the pilot program for our body-worn cameras was implemented last fall. So we've just entered as of this week, which would be about mid-January, the third and final phase of the pilot program.
Okay, and why did SMPD do a pilot program versus just rolling out the program altogether?
Well, I like to be a bit more thoughtful than just having the knee-jerk reaction on something that has such a high dollar value. When we're talking about outfitting, upwards of 100 of our police officers and civilian field personnel, the costs can be rather daunting. And I wanted to make sure that, one, we acquired the appropriate technology, one that would serve to also be able to communicate with our existing in-car camera platforms. I wanted to understand what were the measurables, what's the ideal end result of the body-worn camera program in a meaningful way that is quantifiable, not just we implemented a program because we were sensitive to all of the things that were happening nationally without really understanding what's the value for Santa Monica, which is a very different organization and community than is what's happening elsewhere.
Dr. Kopp, how did the relationship between SMPD and Cal State Fullerton evolve? How did that all get started?
About a year and a half to 2 years ago, Cal State hosted a symposium on body-worn cameras, and we brought some leading researchers out, and Santa Monica attended. We met there, and we kind of hit it off that they wanted to do the pilot. We can provide that research element, and we've partnered ever since.
And you mentioned the research. How important is, I guess, the research component of a pilot program like this? Like, is it data and statistics and analysis that you're doing?
It's all of that. So basically, we're doing what the department asked us to do was to gauge the attitudes and opinions of, one, the community, and then also their officers, to see what they thought about this technology and if they decide to move forward. So we conducted surveys of both groups, and I'm also going out with officers wearing the cameras and interviewing them and basically seeing how they're using the technology. And the research is important because, one, it gives the chief the measurables and the data she needs to make the most informed decision possible. But also, the specific question we were asked to address is one that's actually under-researched nationally. So we're going to be able to contribute to the national discussion about what communities and officers think about the technology.
So in other communities, they have body-worn camera programs. Have you seen any, in the data, any similarities, differences between them and Santa Monica? Or you're not really looking at that?
We look at most of the research to date, and this is a burgeoning field. So when we say we know a little, it's very, very little. Most of what has been looked at is whether the impact of cameras on effectiveness, use of force, crime, complaints. Santa Monica doesn't have those problems. So that's why we're focusing on, the attitudes and opinions. They are comparable. In talking to the communities and the officers, they have some real concerns. They're overly positive of the technology. They're very supportive of it. They have some concerns. Some of them have to do with privacy. One interesting aspect that diverges Santa Monica from other places is they have privacy concerns, but it's not a concern for invasion of their privacy by the police department. And all of the responses indicate that Santa Monica has a very, very positive relationship with their community. Their big concern with the technology is, one, how the film could be manipulated by a third party. So someone other than the police department, if someone else got a hold of it, getting out there. Their other one is the realization that, hey, cameras don't catch everything. And the officers have some of the same concerns because there's this perception that, okay, there's a camera, it's going to film everything, that's the end of the story. And what I like to say is that if the truth is 10 spots, the camera's going to give you 5. And so it's just kind of that realization that, okay, this is going to give you part of the story, but there's a lot more that goes on behind the scenes.
Chief, I see you nodding there. Anything to add to that?
Well, I think the important thing, and to Dr. Kopp's point, is the camera is not a panacea for all that ails. We are in a very unique position. The relationship that we have with our community and the community and the police department is one where we're not in the same space as some of the agencies and the communities that we've seen where issues have played out on the national stage. However, we can't be tone deaf to the calls for enhanced transparency, and we can't be tone deaf to not implementing a technology that will perhaps strengthen the bond that we have with our community. But I also want to have that kind of information that can, so we can make an informed decision, but that we're also very authentic about what we expect here. Because, you know, it's always interesting when one listens to different sides of the conversation. In some places, you know, the camera tells it all. And it's like, well, no, it doesn't. And depending on who's saying that, it can carry it carries the day. And in other areas, typically when the police camera isn't showing what someone wants to see, oh, you know, there was this other problem. So what I want to be able to do is to have realistic ongoing conversations both with staff and with our community about, you know, there are limitations. This is just an opportunity to see a bit more into something where a strong bond, a strong relationship, and an authentic and properly operating police department that is capable of self-monitoring and self-policing can use this as a tool. Not as a cure-all, but right, as another tool to help us to shine a positive light on conduct, whatever that conduct may be.
Dr. Kopp, can you tell me a little bit more about how the cameras work? Is it worn like on the person and then it's rolling 24/7?
So it's once it's turned on, as you'll have, basically they might wear it center mass on a pocket. Some places even wear it on a belt buckle. However, depending on the fitness level of the officer, you may have a skewed view. Mm-hmm. Basically, once it's on, it's always recording video. When you hit the button and it goes live, it's going to record audio and video from 1 minute back from when you hit the button.
Got it.
And basically the light will go from green to red. Basically, green is go, red is no. You're live. While it's going to vibrate about every 30 seconds to remind the officer that the camera's on, but it's also going to emit an audible beep. And normally most of them have like a magnet. They'll wear them there. So, and this could be one of the issues with the camera in general is like when you get into a use of force, which is what everyone's interested in. If it gets jostled, it can come off rather easily. You know, what's the public going to say about that? But you know, that's as the technology develops, that's just another issue that's going to be tackled.
And question for both of you. So is it true that like officers, once they get used to wearing the camera, they'll sometimes sort of either talk to the camera or narrate what they're seeing or what's going on? And is that helpful?
Yes. I recently went out with one of my officers who wears the camera as he does his commercial enforcement. And I was observing him through the course of his workday and learning a bit more about commercial enforcement than I thought I'd forgotten. And I noticed that at a point, because these are very complicated kinds of enforcement stops where you're doing enforcement against these heavy vehicles, 18-wheelers, and every stop is an inspection and that kind of thing. I noticed at a point that he had gone back to the vehicle to get a camera. And so I started talking to him. I said, well, you've got a body-worn camera. Why not utilize that in the same way as you would use this camera that you're going to take pictures with? But the important thing is you get video and you can narrate. And you know, and I understand cops are, you know, we're an interesting breed. We're not going to go, oh yeah, chief, right on that. That's a great idea. And he goes, But later on, I happened to comment, and oh yeah, that's what's happening now. And we talked about the need for, you know, how does that translate with providing imagery to the judge? Okay, well, we'll get you a tablet and you can push, you know, go, and the judge can see in real time and hear you narrating what it is that you're looking at. And, you know, you can point out different things that sometimes a static photograph doesn't convey the same way that a video might. So we're looking to expand these non-traditional uses as well as the more traditional use, which is based on an officer's engagement of a member of the community.
And Dr. Kopp, you were talking about earlier community surveys. So you're doing surveys of the community to see what citizens think of this program? What are you learning?
So overall, they're highly supportive of the program. They're not really concerned about the cost, which was kind of surprising. They might not know the exact dollar figure, but at least according to them, they're not concerned. According to their surveys, they'll be more trusting of officers with cameras. They're going to feel safer in the city with officers with cameras. They're overall highly positive. As I said earlier, their privacy concerns are not about them being filmed. They actually don't think that officers should be able to turn the cameras off even if a citizen requests it. That was actually surprising given a lot of the national discussion that has happened. Their real concern is basically what happens with the videos after they're recorded, and not so much the release of them, but if they're manipulated so that they don't accurately depict what actually happened. Their other concern was, as I stated earlier, it's the realization of the limitations of the technology, what it can't show.
I want to follow up. You were saying it's a very expensive program. Why is that? The cameras, I don't think, are expensive, or am I wrong?
It's the data. So if you imagine, if you watch a video on your computer, look at the size of that file, and that could be 2 or 3 minutes.
The storage is the
storage.
I see.
If you imagine, Chief, how many on any given day, how many officers do you have on duty throughout a 24-hour period? It's probably about 30.
So you fill up hard drive after hard drive after hard drive.
We're talking
servers,
terabytes of storage.
Terabytes, right.
And it has to be very secure because we're talking about evidence. And it has to be stored for differing lengths of times depending on what it depicts. I know, I can't remember Santa Monica's exact policy for how long they keep them, but other agencies keep them for as long as 2 years no matter what it's of. If it depicted a crime, they're going to keep it as long as the statute of limitations are in effect.
Okay, so Chief, Dr. Kopp talked about community surveys. What about the officers? What did they say about the ones that are participating? Do they like the program? Are they on board? Did they volunteer? They did volunteer.
Yes, because of various labor union concerns. In order to put this forward as a change, it would represent a change in working conditions, a circumstance which then evokes a need to meet and confer. Well, I didn't want to go that route for a pilot, so we sought out volunteers, and we are very clear that there's a sunrise date on the pilot program and there's a sunset date on the pilot, wherein we will no longer be doing data collection. However, as part of the evolving nature of this process, if after the pilot is over, officers should choose to continue to wear the camera, pending a more formal decision by the police administration in terms of whether the pilot will then move into more formal ground, and we then begin to move into the meet and confer, as I talked about, with the labor union, etc., then that will occur, and those officers in the meantime could continue to wear the cameras. And I have a feeling that there won't be a sea change in the number of officers who, when the pilot is officially over, who move away from it and say, okay, I'm done, I don't want to do that. Because it's one of these things where I think our officers, at least I can speak to those in Santa Monica, understand the dynamic of the larger issues that are at play here. They want to protect the community as much as they want to protect themselves. And I always say this, the cameras are there for those things, but I think the cameras also, and this is something that can't get lost, shine a light on the wonderful work that the men and women of the Santa Monica Police Department do all the time, that doesn't always get noticed because it happens as part of the day-to-day grind of what policing can be. And this gives us an opportunity to see more clearly, as the organization's administration, some of that wonderful work and to champion that work that might otherwise have gone unnoticed. So there is a different side to be gained and a different benefit to be gained from the operation of these cameras, even though the primary reason for having them is addressing the issues of transparency, community confidence, those kinds of things.
What are the next steps? So it's a pilot program now. You mentioned it has a predetermined sunset.
Yes.
What are the next steps, and would it roll out, and when?
Well, there's the research element and all that they need to do, and I should let you speak to what your side of that is.
Once the third and final wave of officers wearing the cameras ends, sometime in March. We're going to roll out the post surveys for both the community and all of the agency personnel. So expect to see links asking you to participate in that. We push them out through social media. Officers have even gone out to public events and gotten people who might not otherwise be accessed. So we look forward to hearing what they have to say to that. Once we've gathered all that data, we're basically going to go into a dark room and start crunching all the numbers and come up with basically what all of this data is telling us. And then we will produce a report that will go to the chief and to the city documenting, hey, here's what we found. Kind of touching on what the chief had just talked about, one interesting finding from the pre-survey of all agency personnel, and this actually surprised me. Santa Monica personnel actually think the body-worn cameras will benefit officers more than the community.
And why is that?
We haven't been able to unpack it, but if you think about like in terms of like any possible complaint resolution, documenting what they're doing, they think it's going to have a bigger positive for them than it will be for the community. And to date, most people have thought, okay, well, this really benefits the community, and the police are just going along because it's a democratic society and enough people had said you have to do this.
Chief Seabrooks, Dr. Kopp, thank you so much. We have shared a lot of great information today. Did you have fun?
You know I always have fun when I come here.
Right. Did you enjoy your first time as the chief?
I did. Thanks for going easy on me.
Oh, you were fantastic. Fascinating stuff you guys are up to and gals are up to. Keep up the great work, and thanks for keeping the community safe. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And thank you. It's
Awesome.
always a pleasure to see you and to have these chats.
Absolutely, and I love hearing from our viewers too. So thanks everybody for watching. If you would like, by the way, you can follow Chief Seabrooks on Twitter at Santa Monica COP, which stands for Chief of Police, not Cop. And we'll see you again for another episode of Ask the Chief sometime real soon. Thanks for joining us. COP.
There you go. Or KOPP.